Hello and welcome everybody to my January reading wrap up. I managed to read a total of 12 books throughout the month of January. Here's a little look of my spread where I show all the statistics and little interesting numbery bits, I guess, showcasing that. So yes, let's get into the actual reviews. This is my little reading journal for this year. This is the My Book Journal by Poppy Loves London in collaboration with Lucy Says I Do. I got this through Etsy. They had lots of different versions, lots of different styles, and then I just added loads of Hello Kitty and Pusheen stickers to it, because why not? And then inside I've got lots of stickers as well. So we're going to start off with my first read of the month, and that is The Coldest Touch by Isabel Sterling. After witnessing the traumatic death of her brother, Elise is cursed to see the death of people whenever she touches them. Vampire Claire comes into her life to introduce her to the world of the paranormal, as well as trying to recruit her for her own agenda into the paranormal organisation called The Veil. I pretty much gave everything that I look for when I'm reviewing a book a 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I felt hard for this book, honestly, and I loved seeing Elise come into her power. I felt like the whole touching people and seeing their deaths was a really interesting concept, and it's one that I don't think I've read about before in a book. I might have seen it in TV shows, but I don't feel like I've read about it before, so I really enjoyed seeing that and kind of how the law and the magic rules of that worked. But as well as that, it was interesting to see Elise kind of navigate her life with what she feels is a curse. She goes very isolated, she kind of closes in on herself. I guess like a knock-on effect, dissolves a lot of her relationships because of this. Obviously she doesn't want to accidentally touch anybody because she doesn't want to see everybody's deaths, and an interesting thing to note is that she actually feels the impact of the death, like the physical pain and the emotional strain of it. So understandably you'd want to isolate yourself, but obviously that fractures relationships. So yeah, navigating the grief of her brother and as well as growing relationships as she kind of comes into it a little bit more and learns about it. Claire, our vampire, had such a complex existence, and I thoroughly enjoyed seeing her grow with each new experience, despite already living through probably a lot of similar experiences over her time. She was kind of just absorbing it and learning and growing and kind of coming into herself, which was a joy to read about. Personally for me, I really enjoy when a fantasy novel is both fantastical and believable in equal measures, especially in regards to the people that inhabit that world. And for me, this book just felt layered and real and magical, and I really did enjoy this one. So yeah, if you want to find out more of my review thoughts, feel free to check out my Goodreads, which is always linked in the description. I go into more depth and more detail, or have a look on my channel. I might have done a dedicated book review or vlog as well. So yeah, that is The Coldest Touch, which was the first book that I read in January, and it was a 5-star read. The next book I finished in January was a free audiobook, and it was through Audible, and that was The Secret of Crickley Hall by James Herbert, and it was read by David Rintoul. I have a physical book somewhere, I think it was my mum's or something, so I probably got one buried somewhere. I think it's one of the mass market paperback editions, and it's got like the TV show version on it. I know I have it. In an attempt of respite from their awful year, the Cayleys rent Crickley Hall in the peaceful seaside Devon village of Hollow Bay. It's the stuff of local legend and superstition, and they slowly start to feel a sinister entity, especially their dog Chester, who quite literally hightails it out of there as soon as they enter the new home. So my overall rating for this one was a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought this was fantastic, riveting, action-packed, suspenseful and thoroughly heartbreaking. It was cruel and terrifying as well. It was definitely like a haunted house ghost kind of story, but there was so much depth to it that I wasn't necessarily anticipating, and it absolutely floored me. It was a complete emotional whirlwind. I loved how intensely the narrator ramped up their voice as the scary scenes were building up. It just added to that intense, chaotic atmosphere, and I felt my heart rate accelerating as I was waiting to find out what happened next. The way the reveal was written in particular from multiple POVs was absolutely amazing, and oh my god, absolutely phenomenal. I listened to that section twice, and I'm glad I did because I was listening to it as I was doing other things, so I didn't really pick up on it properly, but by the second time I was like, oh my god, mind blown. But yeah, I really did love it, and I'm looking forward to finding somewhere where I can find the BBC TV adaptation for the TV show. Next up, I took part in the book club that Amy McCall created for this year. It's the YA book club for 2023, and January's first book was Frozen Charlotte by Alex Bell. This is like a YA horror story. It's another ghost story haunted house actually, so it's interesting that I was kind of reading them alongside each other. So grief-stricken over the sudden death of her friend Jay, Sophie decides she still wants to spend the summer with her step-cousins in Scotland, if only to solve the paranormal mystery shrouding Jay's death and the earlier demise of Rebecca, her youngest cousin. Straight away, I felt this uneasy feeling. Like instantly in the first paragraph of the first chapter, there was just something so unsettling and uncomfortable about it, and I knew I was going to be in for a scary ride, and I was right about that. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars, by the way, I forgot to mention. It kept that hostility, like this eerie sense of foreboding throughout the whole of the storytelling, and I felt uncomfortable from all this creepy atmosphere that kept ramping up. I ended up blitzing through the rest ahead of time. I think it's because I just couldn't peter it out. It was very Moorish, like I really enjoyed my time in it, and also I just kind of needed to rip off the plaster and get it over and done with, because petering out all that suspense and all that creepy feeling, it was just making it worse for me, and I was like, no, I just need to get it out of the way. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. As soon as Sophie got to her family's house in Scotland, the house and its inhabitants just felt so wrong to me. There was this just off energy, like you could just read it off of the page and it just did not feel right. Mental health depiction was very stigmatized and dated, I will say. I think this was released in 2014. So I mean, everything's changing, especially with like mental health, so there's some things that I wouldn't have personally agreed with in there, like the way they stigmatized it, but I didn't like how it felt like a blame it on the crazies kind of vibe. It's just a bit off. The characters I found were super unlikable, but it didn't diminish my enjoyment, which I thought was great. I like when characters aren't the best, like you're not necessarily rooting for them, but it's not affecting how you're appreciative of the story and you want to know more and you're like really hooked, you know. I can't stand a story where you don't care for the story, you don't care for the characters, you hate everybody and you're just like, what is this? But no, this had that balance perfectly. And yeah, if you want to know a spoiler thing that I wasn't too keen about, check out the Goodreads review or the Storygraph. I use Storygraph too now. But yeah, that was January's pick for the YA book club by Amy McCall, and it was a great one. I really enjoyed it. So I have another ebook here that I picked up. This is The Restless Dark, which I was actually reading for ages, by Erica Waters. Determined to take back her power and shredding the victim stereotype, she goes back to the place where she was nearly tortured and murdered, Cloud Kiss Canyon, to make sure her would-be killer is really dead. Set on the backdrop of the true crime contest, will Lucy gain closure by finding the bones of the Cloud Kiss killer? Oh my god, so much like stumbling over there. The Cloud Kiss killer before someone else does. There were some really interesting discussions regarding the morality and the ethics behind the true crime community. In this, there was quite a few fanatic personality traits regarding it, like where they put the murderer on a pedestal, you know, and that was just so off. Like it gave you something to think about, which was interesting, and kind of the direction where some of these true crime channels are going, it just feels very dramatized, and really, what are you getting out of it? I do enjoy watching true crime, mainly for just information out there, like about a particular case, but I always watch the ones where, well, I tend to watch the ones, I lean more towards the ones where whoever's presenting the case gives you more backstory about the the person whose life was taken away, their life, what their hopes and aspirations were, who their family was, you know, what they did, all those, you know, the focus was on them. It's given them back their personhood, you know. So I feel like the conversations on true crime in this was very interesting and thought-provoking. The whole setting in terms of story was just really unsettling. I feel like Lucy, as someone sneaking into this competition with a complete different background to everybody else, she's not a true crime fanatic, she's not a fan of the TV the podcast that's hosting the true crime event. She's there as someone that nearly lost her life to the killer that they're all kind of doing this scavenger hunt to find the bones for. I felt that had a whole new perspective added to it, and it was a different kind of balance, which was interesting to the narrative. I will say no one was really likeable, but again, it wasn't to the detriment of my enjoyment, although I did find Lucy was too easy to be manipulated, which was jarring and upsetting and frustrating. The trio of Lucy, Maggie, I think, and Carolina, I think were all their names, worked really well together. They had an interesting dynamic. It didn't always work like positively, but the conversations and the personality traits that they brought out of each other was very interesting to read about, and it created again a lot of thought-provoking points. The finale unfortunately felt a little bit subpar for me. I would have liked a more solid conclusion. I think it just kind of felt like it petered out a little bit. There were some quotes that I really did enjoy, so I'll just read you one of those. So human beings are remarkably good at surviving. It's living that we seem to struggle with. Okay, next up, another audio book. This is the one that I spent my credit on for the month. This is I Am Grimalkin by Joseph Delaney, and it was read by Gabriel Glaister. This is the first time that it's been read by a different audio book narrator, because we're following a different character. So Grimalkin takes the stand now as she recounts her journey keeping the Fiend's head out of enemy hands, whilst Tom figures out a way to stop him once and for all. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's like maybe the 7th or 8th book in the series, so I won't go into like spoilery points or anything. I'll just give you my brief thoughts. I really enjoyed seeing the journey set immediately after the events in the last book, as well as flashbacks of Grimalkin's kind of training as being this witch assassin, and her mentoring a young witch. It kind of gave a bit of everything, because I think originally I thought it was just going to be her origin story, so I was pleasantly surprised when it was like more of a continuation, like a linear continuation, but then we did get that flashback with a bit of an origin, so it was nice that it was like rolled into one. I got the best of both worlds, I felt. I did find that I couldn't connect with Grimalkin's voice as much as I could with Tom, but to be fair, that's understandable because we've had all the books beforehand with Tom. I've got to know his character, I've got to know how he thinks, you know, easy to get into his head, whereas Grimalkin, she's so, like, everything that I've read about her the majority of the time has been in fear or awe. She's very standoffish, you don't really want to be near her, so being in her head was a bit jarring, and obviously there was that sort of disconnect there as well, but she has that disconnect to humanity as well, so it was a bit kind of expected, you know. It was still refreshing though to be in a different character's head and kind of see how they went through events, how they thought things through, and also it went to prove how much of a badass character Grimalkin is. So yeah, I did really enjoy that one, so that was a 3.5 stars. I listened to another free audio book from Audible, and this one was what else is doing, The Girl and the Witch's Garden by Erin Bowman, and this one was read by Roisin Rankin. I can't remember the young girl's name. It might pop up in my review, but for now I don't remember. Her father is very ill and sends her to stay this summer with her grandma and the mother who abandoned her for her studies. At Mallory Estate, she discovers the family has magic and it's being used to locate something exceptional. I loved how deep this was, especially with the complex family dynamics. It's not your average, family relationship. It was complex and messy and layered, and there was hurt there and unresolved resentment, and it was just, it felt real, you know. And I felt like it being in a middle grade story, it was good to represent a different kind of normal for young readers, you know. So yeah, and you know, the feelings of abandonment and the magic used for nefarious purposes all kind of rolled in together absolutely beautifully. The characters were great. I think Teddy was one of my favourites, if not my most favourite character out of all of them. I loved the riddles and the journey to find the object of the task. I'm trying to be as like coy as possible. I feel like the heart of the story was acceptance of death, and that nothing can really last forever, and understanding that. It was a very bittersweet story, but it was a lovely one too, and I'm glad to have read this. So yeah, that was 3.5 stars, The Girl and the Witch's Garden by Erin Bowman. Next up, I finally read Dracula's Guest and Other Weird Stories by Bram Stoker. I finished this up. I'd been reading it for a couple of months. I had been doing a little project on the channel where I was basically doing a read aloud, an audiobook if you will, for all the short stories in this collection, and they have all published now. If you're interested, I will link the playlist in the cards for you. But yeah, it took me so long because they took me like an hour or so to film and then maybe another hour to edit, so I wasn't doing it consistently like one a week or one every day. And it, you know what, the amount it takes is stumbling over words, especially because they're like classics. So there's words that are used and it's set in different regions, so there's different like lingo and slang, and oh my god. And also my throat was just drying out, like it's drying out now. When I talk too much, my throat just hurts. But I finally finished it, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So it's basically a look at the original starting script of Dracula. There's like it's like the original opening scene, I think, that got scrapped in favour for the opening scene that we know today, accompanied by some of Stoker's short stories, put together, I believe, by his wife after his death. So I think it's like posthumously published. Overall, it was a very positive experience with the whole collection. Some of my favourites were Dracula's Guest, which is the title of the collection, The Becoming of Abel Behenna, and The Gypsy Prophecy. So yeah, recommend those ones. I think you can get them singularly as well, so if you just wanted to read like one of those, then I'm pretty sure you can find them as single little novellas out there somewhere. I read another collection of short stories, and this one is Tales Untold, Mythos Around the World. It's by a plethora of authors: Jessica Hobson, D.M. Monkson. I can't remember who edited it all together, unfortunately, but this was a e-arc through Book Sirens. I was very late to publishing my review, but I still published it, and this is 15 short stories inspired by various mythologies and folklores and legends all around the world, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars overall. So I will just basically go down and go through all the different stories, titles, and give you my star rating next to them. So we've got Canvas and Light, and you can learn the different authors as well that way. Canvas of Light and Dark by Jamie Kang, 1 out of 5. The Tome of Squire Cable by D.B. Carter, 1 out of 5. The Listless Rose by Maureen Carlton, 3 out of 5. Crane in the Mist by Satyajit Akia, 3 out of 5. Never Trust a Fae by Jessica Hobson, 1 out of 5. Quetzal Feathers by Brenda Radchick, 3 out of 5. A Gabbed Harbour by Rashi P. Menon, 3 out of 5. A Final Cut by Sean Dale, 3.5 out of 5. Dead Man Tells a Tale by M.N. Key, 2 out of 5. The Lonely Garden by Max Turner, 4 out of 5. Halcyon Days by Kimberly Curso, 4 out of 5. The Young Man and the New World by D.M. Monkson, 5 out of 5. Siren Song by Chaz Beebe, 2 out of 5. The Fairy Soldier's Last Request by Joel C. Flanagan Grainman, 5 out of 5. And The Emissary by Mark Pigott, 4 out of 5. So overall, the collection, I would say, is 3 out of 5 stars. Another free audiobook that I listened through Audible is The Asylum by John Harwood, and it was read by Rosalind Landor. This one is about a confused and disorientated Georgia Ferris wakes up in a private asylum with no recollection of the last 2 weeks. The doctor tells her she admitted herself willingly under the name of Lucy Ashton the day before, then promptly suffered a seizure. It follows the unravelling of the psyche, identity and sinister speculations to find the truth behind what is going on and who she is. This one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars also. I do enjoy an unreliable narrator when done correctly. I love it when our main character's storylines blurs the lines between reality and insanity without making a mockery of mental illness, and I feel like this did it quite well. However, I felt like excuse me, but I felt like about 25% of the way into this it lost its way for me. The dense storytelling was too much for what I wanted at that time, and I'm certain that I lost a lot of small details that made much more sense, like, and connected all the dots, but completely just sifted through my mind. I was contemplating DNFing it at that time, but I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because I did generally enjoy it. I did get more invested once again, particularly when we started to follow the threads of the main character's history, but then this quickly soured for me when what I feel could have been a beautiful, like, sisterly relationship between cousins began to turn kind of incestuous, and then I was immediately like, oh no. I did enjoy the dark and gothic tones of this, and it perfectly captured the time period. The scene in the storm, particularly with the aunt, made me super emotional, so I know that the writing was beautiful and well done, but I think it was just too dense and intricate for what I was after in an audiobook at that time. So I don't know, perhaps a reread one day, I wouldn't rule it out, but then again, I don't often reread books, so who's to say that day will ever come. So yeah, 3 out of 5 stars for The Asylum. Okay, back to a physical book. I did actually a physical and an audio blend. I found the audiobook on YouTube and I did a little bit of both. And this is for Beck, the 4th book in the Demon Artist series by Darren Shan. Trainee priestess Beck fights to fit into her adopted tribe, but when the demon comes, the fight becomes a war. A quest to banish them from the lands begins. Each of these stories so far seem to be like a story in itself, but they've all got a connecting thing with, like, the demons. I actually picked this up so early in the year after not being in this world for years, because I thought this series was a quartet and this was the 4th and final book. Lo and behold, it's a 10-book series. I am nowhere near done. So that's upsetting, but also not, because I still enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was interesting to learn about the different types of magic. There was kind of like a masculine and feminine thing going on. A little bit dated, but it was interesting to hear. I think I would have liked to have seen more pushback, because you could see the workings of Beck's mind, like, learning the different forms, but I wanted to see her tackle that a bit more and be like, well, why is this, like, why is that a thing, you know? I would have loved to have known more about Bram's identity and, like, where he came from and why he can do some of the things he can do. And he just had such a sweet soul as well. He just had such a lovely whimsical affinity with the animals, so he was an instant favourite for me. This was kind of heartbreaking though. There were so many times where I was getting used to a character and I was like, okay, I might not like you, but, like, you're adding to the story, like, I'm enjoying you being here. And then tragedy would befall and I was like, okay, so why did I just connect to that character for no reason? And my heart would be wrenched. So yeah, every time I got used to someone, my heart would be ripped in two. The story was definitely a solid quest kind of narration, and I felt like a more sturdy predecessor, a kind of demon vibey story, than the Demon Thieves by Sally Green, which I think I read last year. So if you're looking for something, maybe you had similar thoughts to me with the Demon Thieves, maybe try this series. So this shot from an okay 3 stars to a really enjoyable 4 stars by the end. I did enjoy my time in this. I don't know if I'm gonna continue on necessarily with the rest of the series. I might just audiobook the rest of them. I don't feel any need keeping hold of these books, so I'll probably do like an unhaul at some point and include these ones in there. But yeah, I'm enjoying my time. I just don't feel a particular attachment to them anymore. I do have a quote, and it says, "Time doesn't touch this cave, or if it does, it touches it softly, slowly, subtly." Okay, another physical book here. I have The White Book by Han Kang, translated from the Korean by Deborah Smith. This is autobiography adult. It's kind of experimental as well, actually. But it's basically an autobiography reflecting on white things and grief, I would say. And I gave this a 4 out of 4 stars. It's just as captivating and unusual in writing that enchanted me in The Vegetarian when I read that like years ago. Completely different, like completely different things. This is autobiographical, The Vegetarian's fiction and literary fiction at that, but it's just, oh my gosh, Han Kang really knows how to write. Really knows how to capture an audience. The White Book looks at grief. It looks at particularly her mother's first child's death, who passes away moments after she's born. Circumstances unfortunately just wasn't like, the medically wasn't there for her to have much of a chance in life, being very premature, and sadly she didn't survive. And even though Han Kang wasn't there, she didn't exist at that time, she shoulders this kind of grief nonetheless, with the unanswerable questions of what if my sister had survived? Would I be here? You know, am I haunted by the ghost of her presence? Is she kind of directing me in life? All these sort of questions, these unanswerable questions, and she takes on the potential emotions that her mother might have felt during the time that she went through that situation. She's also writing this in Poland, and all she can see is the destructions of the war. She can see it in how everything just looks brand new. Nothing is older than 70 years, and if it is, it's just like the foundations of things, and then everything new is built up on it. So everything was just basically bombed and destructed. And yeah, in a way, all of this connects to war, death, grief, and the sister that she never knew. It's very experimental in nature, but it's incredibly compelling, it's incredibly thought-provoking. I don't know, it made me pause to think, you know? Yeah, I do have a couple quotes, and I'll just pick one. The glittering of multitudes is there, the shifting, stirring, tossing of multitudes. Nothing is eternal. Okay, and the last book that I finished for the month was Bitter by HardcoreCupcakeHailstorm. Bitter just wants to stay in the safe confines of her school and make her art until she has enough of the dangers of Lucille and decides to take matters into her own hands. This one I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. We started off with a 5-star, we ended with a 5-star. January was just a beautiful month for me for reading. I really enjoyed seeing more of the city, Lucille, and how a different set of characters are affected by what was happening there. It's basically overrun with corrupt leaders, politicians, you know, monsters if you will, and the people that live there that have to face that in their daily lives are just sick of it. So there's constant protests, there's riots, there's people saying they've had enough, and there's bodies constantly battered and bruised. And Bitter just doesn't want any part of it. She doesn't believe that we should be harmed for wanting peace. She wants peace, but she doesn't know how to go about it, and so she just closes herself off and she just focuses on her art. To be back in this world, the first book was Pet, in the same world, but focusing on different characters, was phenomenal. I absolutely loved my time here. Bitter herself came off very standoffish, but I thought it was so beautiful to see that hard exterior slowly chip away, and her to feel happy and comfortable to become vulnerable with those that she loves as the story went on. And as she learnt more about how she can have a place in the revolution if she wants to, but not every place has to be at the front line. You know, you can, whatever you do for a better future, for change, is worthwhile, and it's valued and valid. And yeah, you can make a change in any way that you feel comfortable doing. And I thought that was such a beautiful message, and I thought Bitter as the main character, kind of learning that, was the best character to go through that journey with. I had so many quotes for this one, but I'll just pick one. I think it's quite beautiful actually. They sounded like they were remembering a prophecy, like they were making a world, reciting a prayer. So yes, that is all the books, all the 12 books that I read in January. You've got to let me know what you read during the month of January. How did your first reading month of the year go? Did it kick off to a good start? I really hope it did. Anyway, that is it for me today, and I will catch you in another video soon. Bye!